But interestingly enough, that so-called civilization is much less present in the plans of the center of civilization, supposedly. And although the cities from which he supposedly copied real civilization did as well have palaces in this survivor style, because the survivor culture did reach there as well, they are not as opulent and as big as those in St. Petersburg. If this culture was really invented in those places, as penguins are trying to assure us, they should have the best samples, but they don't. Masterpieces of this style are found in greatest concentration in St. Petersburg, and that happens to be one of the last locations we saw on the map. Tar- Tartarskaya Sloboda, one of the last places where the survivors were free. And one other shameless lie of the penguins is the so-called neoclassical style. They had to coin a new style, and the lie that all of a sudden the people got a craziness for old stuff and revived some old style that was otherwise dead. No, the style was always there. It was always the style of the survivors since time that we call antique till its last breath, which was just a couple of 100 years ago. But they are talking about reviving a style copied from antiquity because they introduced 1,000 artificial years in history and few other artificial periods, and somehow had to justify the artifacts and tie them to this fantasy timeline of theirs. This is one of the professional night guards of the palaces nowadays. They work a night shift and they are on a fixed salary till the end of their days. But it is not easy to get into this high security team. To deserve that, you need to penetrate into the galleries with the most exquisite art pieces at night when they're locked. And so it was this great King Peter, together with the not less questionable persona of the chap Montferrand, who fabricated all this story of how St. Petersburg was actually built. And that is why in their so-called descriptions they cleverly avoid any mention of the actual techniques used and only distract people's attention with stupid fairy tale style stories. Like, for example, they put the Alexander column to transport it on a boat. According to some versions at that time, it was still raw and it weighed 1,400 tons. And then a bad luck, it fell in the water, and it waited like this, floated on the surface of the water, or I don't know how, they don't give details, but it waited for some soldiers to run marathon distance and come and rescue it. After running the marathon distance, they took a day's break and after that went in the water and rescued it. My God. So what was the column doing while waiting for them 2 days? And then how did they lift it to tie it with ropes? Or that's some of the fairy tales we read in the official descriptions of the full story. I mean, you cannot do that with hands. Maybe they used some other parts of the body. After all, primitive men were very strong according to some cave paintings, so God knows. Or let me tell you some other funny points from the mainstream history, how they distract people's attention. All this heavy stuff, oh, it must have been somebody like a very strong man. And yes, they coined some personality like that. Of course, he doesn't have any living descendants or anything else like that, like all the main characters of the full fiction. So he was meeting a few bears in his childhood and he defeated them both with bare hands. In the beginning, they were telling people that on the top of the Alexander column there is a statue of King Peter to make it less questionable why such column anyway here. But as too many people started noticing, especially as photography developed and they could get close shots, that it is actually a girl over there, they started saying, oh, actually there is an angel there with the face of King Peter. Maybe at some point in the future I will have to make more videos on St. Petersburg, because there are so many um, discrepancies there from what we are used to think is history, that I have only scratched like the main points and not in detail even. The very geographic location of St. Petersburg raises many questions just by itself. It is a nasty swamp area. Which sane person will start building on swamps? Moreover, the capital of the biggest country on earth, as if they don't have any other land. It is this great King Peter who came up with this genius idea to shift his capital from Moscow to this most remote and inhospitable and very cold area that has no infrastructure at all and is relatively underdeveloped. It had no roads connecting it with anything at all. On the top of that, part of these survivor-style buildings are even in a foreign country, Finland. He put his capital right on the border, even stepping a bit in the neighbor's country. And as if all this is not enough, this exactly the center of the city is located above this turbulent area where four tectonic plates meet. That is not only the best location for those who are looking for natural calamities, but it also tangibly affects the health of the people who live there. The percentage of people suffering from migraines, insomnia, depression, and many other diseases are much higher, but only when they live in this area. If the same person leaves the area, they often get better. And it's so cold. In winter it reaches minus 40 degrees. Personally, for me, the explanation for all this would be that actually he was on a mission to remodel the remains of one of the last strongholds of the survivors and to mask them to look like something else. Also, at the time when the survivors planned their city, it seems, as we'll see in the future episodes, that the climate was much more favorable and actually pleasant. And as far as the unfavorable influence of the meeting point of the tectonic plates, maybe it is the people who do not know how to use and harvest this energy that get negatively affected. After all, in many places of power where some people experience ecstatic influences from the place, others get sick. But why would the survivors build their city on a swamp? Well, maybe it wasn't a swamp at the time they built it at first. The face of Earth has changed tangibly over there recently. Or maybe they somehow harvested those energies, because if you remember the gigantic megaliths from even before the recent survivor times, maybe those signify that this has been a place of power for a long time. I received this message from a YouTube user, and I would really want to give you a clue about the last episodes that are coming. Please don't worry about anything. This nightmare for humanity will end up in a good way. We are at the very dawn right now of our awakening from this bad dream. And also, let's discover our true history together. Please help the New Earth project, especially with two sites, the pyramid in France on the border with Spain, and also the Great Wall of Paraíba in Brazil. It will be much appreciated if some local people can find more information and footage of this great wall locally in Brazil. And as far as the French pyramid, if somebody can find photos of its supposed construction just few decades ago, that will surely prove that it is not an ancient site, but it is indeed a recent pyramid. Or maybe some locals remember more details that could be of some use in establishing the true age of the pyramid. Both of these sites are reviewed in the documentary called Planet of the Megaliths on my channel New Earth.